so with all of our details now painted, as you can see, we've now got all of this stuff done across all of these models. They're looking awesome. What we are going to do now is the long process of highlighting. Now this is going to take a little while, but it's definitely worth it once you've done it. So the colour we're going to be using is Blue Horror, and that's because we're going to be highlighting all of the armour first. Now, there's a couple of different ways that we're going to be doing this. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to start with the Reaver to demonstrate our first technique. And so I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush for this. So I'm going to be using a Wargamer Insane Detail from Army Painter. And what we're going to do is we've got some Blue Horror thinned down on our palette. And what we want to do, take some of that off because that's a little too much, is on these little infantry guys, what we want to do is we basically want to pick out the top edges. We don't want to do all of them because, well, you really don't need to, given as we did that rust grey glaze on the flat panels. So the Fenrisian Grey is still, not Fenrisian Grey, Space Wolves Grey is still shining through, which is giving us our Fenrisian Grey highlight equivalent. That's why we're going straight in with the Blue Horror. So for example, here on this Reaver, I've just done that little belt there, and I'm going to do the kind of the tops of the fingers here and here and here. I'm also going to do this little bit here, like that, and like that. Just the areas that are going to catch the light, because as I say, we've already got quite a bit of highlighting going on because of the way that we did that rust grey glaze. So we're just picking out the sharp details like that, not doing all of the edges. So like for example, on this knee pad here, you can see there's already a bit of a highlight. So on the corner just there, I just want to add a tiny little bit of Blue Horror, just like that. And then underneath, once again, just going to add a little Blue Horror going underneath, like that. Simple. I'm just going to pick out these little belt buckles as well. And obviously areas like his gorget and that. So really on these guys, you just need to pick out the sharpest details. However, on someone like Haldor Icepelt, I'm going to wash the brush off. What we are going to do is we're going to highlight as many of these edges as we can, because he is a character, so he deserves it. Just want to go around like that, for example, on the knee joint, or knee pad I should say. And yeah, basically any of his edge highlights. And the same thing for the Invictor, because the Invictor is a big boy and it'll really stand out. So what we want to do, similarly up here, just want to pick out areas like the rivets, make them nice and bright. Like this. And then we're just going to start highlighting those armor panels as well, using the side of our brush. Just being very gentle as we do it, as you would typically with any edge highlight. And with all that Blue Horror applied, we're going to go for something a little bit easier now. And the colour that we're going to use is Slaanesh Grey. I'm going to use this to highlight all those purity seals, the wax seals, but just picking out the raised details. Around the edges and on the inside, like that. And with those purity seals highlighted, what we're now going to do is we're going to highlight all of the parchment, bone, and all of the fur. And the colour is exactly the same for all of these, and it is Pallid Wych Flesh. I don't know why I kept you in suspense, it's because I forgot the name. So, what we're going to do first is with this guy, we've got some thin down on our palette, and we're just going to take this Pallid Wych Flesh and we're going to start picking out all the edges on that parchment, like this. Like that. What we also want to do on the fur is we want to do this across all of the colours within that blend. So we want to kind of start down here at the tip. We just want to pick out the strands in the fur. And we don't want to do it on all of them. Just enough of them to create a little bit more variation within that fur. Kind of like that sort of amount. As you can see, just adds a little bit of a something, as it were, to the fur. Like that. Similarly on Mr. Haldor, Mr. Icepelt I should say, I'm going to do a similar thing. Once again, just picking out certain little ones here and there. If you turn your brush completely sideways, you should be able to pick up a fair few at a time, kind of like a dry brush motion. But as I say, like with the previous bit, you don't want to do all of it, so you just want to kind of pick out little areas, little sections, just to add a little bit of variation to the highlight on that fur. And with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to take some thinned down Administratum Grey. We're going to use this to highlight all of our black details. So on the Reaver, I want to highlight areas like his mask, like this. Picking out those edges, the Administratum Grey, like that. You also want to highlight his weapon, and any of the other black details that there may or may not be on your Reavers. Similarly on this guy, as you can see, I've already done his chapter icon on his shoulder. What we also want to do is we want to pick out the strands of his hair and his beard. Like this. As well as his weapon. And on the Invictor, we also want to pick out the black details on this guy too. So we're going to pick out areas like these rivets, as well as kind of soft handles on the cage, in the areas of the gun, any of the black details essentially. And with all of that Administratum Grey applied, what it's now time to do is start highlighting some metallics. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the gold, and the colour that we're going to be using for this is Sycorax Bronze. So what we're going to do is just move all of these guys out of the way, and we're going to do this on Haldor Icepelt. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our Sycorax Bronze, thin it down on the palette just a little bit. And we're just going to start picking out all of the edges on all of the gold details. Like this. Really is as simple as that. And so with all that gold highlighted with the Sycorax Bronze, what you can see is that the Fyreslayer Flesh and the Retributor armor, what they've done is they create this really lovely tone of gold, and the Sycorax Bronze, rather than kind of putting too stark a highlight on it, really has just made it super shiny, and it's just a really lovely, simple recipe for getting that lovely kind of warm, ancient gold feel. So with that being said, what we are going to do now is we're going to highlight all of the silver details, and we're going to do this in a couple of ways. So we're just going to move the infantry guys out of the way for a second. I'm just going to grab up the Invicta Warsuit. Now, the colour that we're going to be using is Iron Hand Steel, and what we want to do is we effectively want to highlight this guy in two different ways. Now, firstly, we're going to layer up any of the outer workings of the Warsuit. So areas like this little gizmo here, we want that to be nice and shiny. So we just want to highlight it all the way up, like this. Well, layer it all the way up. Whereas on the layer just underneath it, we want to give that an edge highlight, like that. Simple as that. Similarly here on this kind of area here, I'm just going to layer up the kind of tooth mechanisms like this, but what we want to do is we want to highlight that inner edge like that, and we just want to go around like this, and really this is up to you, but what we want to do is effectively get to a position that we are here on the back, which I've already done, where you can see we've got this kind of multi-level going on. What I haven't done here is, for example, on these kind of smokestacks here, we want to brighten those right up, because when you look at the box art or any of the product photography for this guy, he's got really shiny kind of areas on his metallics, as well as kind of really dark metals kind of working together. So you just want to kind of layer up those flat panels like I'm doing here, whilst just avoiding where the kind of Basilicana grey has really settled in those recesses. Just want to go around like this on the Invicta Warsuit. So here you go. See, I've layered that up, but what I want to do is I want to highlight that lower edge. And that's what I mean by the outer workings, effectively. So what we're also going to do is on areas such as Haldor Ice Pelt, we're going to kind of adopt this idea for doing this on the blades. So on the sharp areas of the blades, what we want to do is we want to add this Iron Hand Steel like this, going down the sharp cutting section of the blade. So it gives you this lovely kind of two metallics type thing. And then along the edges up here, you're going to highlight that with the same color. So with the Iron Hand Steel, we just start highlighting those flatter panels. So the same thing goes on the Reaver. But what we want to do is we basically want to get a highlight on any of the metallic silver details that we haven't already covered. And we're not doing anything particularly special for the intercessors. So there we go. Similarly again, we get that kind of lovely two different colours going on in that silver. So we just want to go around picking out all of the silver details like this, and then we're going to come back. And with all of that Iron Hand Steel applied, well, the metallics are finished on the infantry guys. They're not quite finished on the Invicta. What we're going to do now is we are going to highlight all of the flesh tones. And the colour that we're going to be using is Flayed One Flesh. And all we want to do, we're going to take just a small amount of Flayed One Flesh. We want to be very careful here as we do this. We basically just want to pick out all of the sharpest areas on all of our Space Wolves faces. Now this Flayed One Flesh can be used to highlight all of Dark Oath Flesh, Gilman Flesh, and Fireslayer Flesh. You just want to be really careful here. Just want to pick out areas like the eyelids, bridge of his nose, tops of his cheekbones, and the wrinkles on their foreheads. And with that done, what we're now going to do is use a small amount of Wraithbone. And this is going to be to colour in his eyes and their teeth. Just want to be really careful. Just place a dot of that right in the middle. Same on both sides. And with that Wraithbone applied, what we're going to do is going to take a small amount of Black Templar. Just want a really tiny amount of this on your brush. You want to add this as a little dot in the center of that eye to add the pupil. Like that. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use a small amount of Blood Angel's Red. I'm going to use this to apply a layer over those shiny gems. So this will be mostly on Haldor Ice Pelt and any of the ones that you've glued on from the upgrade kits. Like that. What we also want to do on the Invicta is we want to colour in any of the little lenses that we've also highlighted. With the Iron Hand Steel, like so. And next up, what we want to do is we want to use some Stormhost Silver to add a final highlight to those blades. So all we want to do is we just want to run the Stormhost Silver down the sharp edge, like that, on the axe. Just make it look nice and sharp. And similarly on the Reaver as well. And give that blade a nice highlight. But what we also want to do is we want to use this Stormhost Silver to pick out the sharpest details on the Invicta. So areas like the outside bit here on these stubbers, just here. And the last technique that we're going to do is we're going to wash this brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab ourselves an old dry brush. So I've got one here. Like that. And we're going to take a bit of tissue paper. I'm going to take a small amount of this Stormhost Silver, and we just want to start stippling it into tissue paper like this until you get the kind of spacing that you want. And then on the barrel, you want to do a little bit of stippling around the outside like this. So that, as well as on cartridges, or the barrels and things as well. You can build this up to be as strong or as weak as you like. And with that done, our space walls are pretty much finished, and you could leave it there. However, there is one last thing to do before you do any transfers or basing or anything like that, and that is to paint in their pack markings. Now generally what these are is these are a black design that is unique to a specific wolf pack. So in the case of hunter packs, it's going to be red with a black design. In the case of these reavers, I don't quite know what they're called, but they would be the Space Wolves grey with a black design. The Lieutenant, he has his own design, and the Invictor has its own design as well. Now I've done a couple already, as you can see. So here is one that I've done on this Reaver unit, and on this Intercessor unit we've done a design that goes around like that, and that's another one we've done like that on this Reaver unit. So what we are going to be doing is I'm just going to demonstrate one, because the design is totally up to you, and I'm going to do it on the Invictor Warsuit. So we're just going to move the rest of these guys out of the way, and where we want to put our pack marking is on his knee pad there. And what we want to do is we want to draw in 4 equally sized triangles. Now this is a little bit tricky, so it's worth just having a very steady hand and a very small brush, and I'm once again using the Armour Wargamer Insane Detail brush from Army Painter, and the colour I'm using is Black Templar. About 3/4 of the way up, I'm going to start drawing in a diagonal line that goes down towards that bottom left rivet. A little bit more paint. I want this to be reasonably straight. Like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing again, but on the other side. I'm just going to make contact and start trying to draw a straight line heading down like that, giving us our triangle. And we're just going to repeat the process once again, going around about there. I'm just going to draw a line going down to where they meet, like that. Same again. Like that. Just going to keep drawing in these diagonal triangles. So I'm just drawing out the design first before blocking it in. Quickly wash my brush. Somewhere like that. We can always neaten it up a little bit if we need to, because what we can do, it's like we've covered in the previous Blood Angels videos, you can always use that Mephiston red glaze over the top of Blood Angels red to correct any mistakes. So you can see that left line there on this final, it's a little too thick for my liking. Anyway, once you've drawn in the design, what you then want to do is you want to use the Black Templar to colour in the design. like that. I recommend checking out the box art to give you some ideas, or just plan it out. First in your head. And then try to make it happen. Unfortunately, there's not really a much easier way to do this than what I've just demonstrated, so just need a steady hand and a lot of patience. And as I say, if you do make any mistakes, you can always neaten it back up with the appropriate glaze. So if you make a mistake on the rust grey, Spaceballs grey I should say, you can use rust grey, colour it back in. If you make a mistake on the Yandan yellow, you can use Uriel yellow as a glaze to colour it back in. There we go, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to colour in this bottom part as well. So that the design doesn't just kind of start out of nowhere. Like so. And so with all of that freehand pack markings done, our space walls are now finished. So there's Haldor. There's our Invicta warsuit. There's our Reaver. And there's our Intercessor. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the basing. Now you can do this any way that you want, or you can follow along with what I'm going to be doing. So what I'm going to be doing first and foremost is using some Stirland Battlemire all over the base. Like this. What I'm also going to be doing, whilst that bit is drying, is I'm going to be using some pebbles. Now I've got these little graphite little rocks that I got from some fish tank gravel, and so whilst I've got all of that covered all over the base, what I'm going to do is just take a bit of that rock, just drop it in, and then just pat it down so it's flat in the rock, in the Stirland Battlemire. And what that'll do, it'll just hold it in place without the need for glue. And once all that's dry, looking at the Invicta, because it's the largest base and it's easiest to do, what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush all of that soil and all of those rocks with some Tyrant Skull. And you just want to be a little careful around the rocks so you don't just like accidentally ping them off, but it can happen. If you do, just use a bit of PVA glue or indeed just discard them. Depends how many you've got on there, I suppose. Like this, so just with a very gentle dry brush, just catching the edges of all of that texture paint and dirt. And with that dry brush applied, I've added some tufts to the base. I've also added some decals to the miniature itself, because what is finally here is we're going to paint in the rim of all of our bases with some thinned down Corvus Black. And as you can see, our Space Wolves are now finished, and they are glorious. A whole combat patrol of Space Wolves all painted and looking awesome. And it's actually very simple to do, and it doesn't take very long with the techniques that we've explored in this video. And well, it's really effective, particularly that Space Wolves Grey with a rust grey glaze. It just gives you that perfect Space Wolves hue, and I'm really proud of it, and I hope you really enjoyed this video. And yeah. If you enjoyed this one and you'd like to support me further like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. And if you'd like to stay up to date, make sure to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.